All right. To the people of Russia, don't you think this war in Ukraine has gone long enough and far enough? All right, so the Ukrainians report that they've killed now over 135,000 Russians killed. And from what I've seen of watching videos on YouTube and Twitter for almost a year now, I have to believe that, yes, 135,000 Russians have been killed. And with all the grenades getting dropped from drones and artillery and mortar attacks against the Russians, and with the Russians wearing their helmets and some degree of body armor, although some of it has been laughably inadequate, I have to believe that if they weren't killed, a lot of Russian soldiers have had their faces ripped off, and I've saw that. I've seen that, half of the face peeled off. I've seen that. You know, when a grenade goes off from a drone, or mortar going off, or artillery round going off right by you, that shrapnel is going to do some damage. So the blindness, ripped off ears, ripped off faces, cutting off of hands, arms, cutting off of feet, of legs. There's been, I have to believe, in addition to 135,000 dead, and I'm sure that's more than that by now, you've had at least 100,000, if not 200,000 people with grievous injuries, grievous. So the 135, 136,000, they'll never come back. And the 100,000 or 200,000 with all these injuries, to include mental injuries, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, they'll never be fully healed, okay? And yet they're going to live out the rest of their lives like that. And again, for what reason? Okay, Putin's given all kinds of reasons for this. And his most recent reason was, well, we didn't start anything. They started it. Well, okay. Given the free press in the Western world and the Asian world, one would think that if the Ukrainians really did start this by attacking Russia first, that someone would have reported it. And or the intelligence services in the West would have seen it. And do you really think that if Ukraine had attacked Russia first, that anybody would be helping them? No, the West would say, hey, wait, look, dude, you started it. You got to pay the consequences. Well, that hasn't happened. And Russia also said, well, we wanted to demilitarize. And then another excuse was, well, we're under, what was the phrase he used? Something about unending expansion of Russia. Well, why? It's already the biggest country in the world. Why? That was another excuse. Another one, the denazification of Russia. Well, if there's any Russia, maybe there are some Nazis, maybe. Maybe there are some true believers in the Nazi cause, but they're not in power. They've not, maybe they had some midnight rallies or something like that, but they have had no effect on anything in Ukraine. So that excuse that, well, there's Nazis, and don't forget, they were challenged on, well, we don't see Nazis there. So what's your definition of Nazis? And the answer is, well, our definition of Nazi is anyone not like us. Well, for crying out loud, nobody is like you. So if nobody is like you, and anyone not like you is a Nazi, then the entire world is Nazi. The entire world, all except Russia. And that's just ridiculous, okay? So you've lost all kinds of contacts with the rest of the world. You have all kinds of sanction against you that's hurting you. You can't produce goods. Fortunately, some of which are weapons, but you also can't produce like cars and other appliances that need chips, all right? So all for what? What has this gotten you? All right? Now, okay, there has to be some value to you as Russians on what this is going on. You've mobilized 300, maybe 500,000 troops. That's 300 or 500 or some number that of men taken away from your families, men that were used to be having jobs, supporting families. Now the families are on their own, suffering. People are dying because of not being able to afford certain things because they're not there. This is just completely horrible for the Russian people. It's horrible for the families losing loved ones. It's horrible for the soldiers getting grievously wounded. It's horrible for the families that need to deal with all these horrible injuries for the rest of their lives. And what are you getting out of this? What is it worth it to you? Somebody has got to stand up and say, no. Someone in power needs to, the Duma, okay? Now, I don't believe the Duma is as rubber stamping of things as maybe it had been. But as a whole, the Duma should say, hey, wait a minute. Putin, this needs to stop. It really needs to stop. All right. Now, if there are Russian people in eastern Ukraine that want to be under Russia, then they should move to Russia. Really. Had Russia just taken those people and moved them into Russia rather than spending billions of dollars on weapons and billions of dollars of lost revenue because of the sanctions, I think things would be a whole lot better. You know, if you don't like being in a certain country, well, then you move. If you don't like being in a certain neighborhood, you move. If you don't like sending your kids to a certain school, you send them somewhere else. But you don't take over. So that was just a stupid idea. At what cost to Russia? All 136,000 dead, hundreds of thousands wounded, hundreds of thousands of men taken away from their families, just because there were some Russians in Ukraine that weren't happy to be there. And bear in mind, not all the Russians are unhappy. You know, just think about it.